God bless the attorney generals of Louisiana and Missouri. I know you had one of these guys on your show. They've been doing such a great job. They filed a lawsuit alleging the federal government cannot do through big tech that which it could not do to us directly. You know, we have a First Amendment that allows us free speech, and they're not allowed to censor our speech based on viewpoint discrimination. That's the reason for the First Amendment, to protect speech that's unpopular. And they've been doing that. They've been doing that repeatedly through COVID and other of their choice issues that they don't want us speaking out on, through Facebook, through YouTube, through Twitter. We could go on. And so these two attorneys general filed a lawsuit saying this is unconstitutional. They're not allowed to do this. And they won their first big battle. In federal court in Louisiana, a federal judge has just issued a preliminary injunction blocking a long list of federal agencies and officials from communicating with social media platforms about some content online. If you listen to NPR, if you listen to the left, they're going to make you believe that they can't have any communication, that if they found out there's a child pornography ring on Facebook, they're not allowed to call Facebook. That's a lie. That's a lie, and the ruling makes that specifically clear. This is about suppression of viewpoints that are unpopular. It also bars these government agencies from communicating with some of these outside groups like the Stanford Internet Observatory. We've had them on our show. The Election Integrity Partnership, the Virality Project, these people who sort of have been used as proxies by the government to decide which speech is good and which is bad. And I'll tell you, okay, just two things before I give you the floor. This is what the judge found, quote, if the allegations made by the plaintiffs are true, because this still has to go to trial, it's just a preliminary injunction pending trial, the present case arguably involves the most massive attack against free speech in United States history. In their attempts to suppress alleged disinformation, the federal government, and particularly the defendants here named here, are alleged to have blatantly ignored the First Amendment's right to free speech. Although the censorship alleged here almost exclusively targeted conservative speech, the issues raised herein go beyond party lines. The right to free speech is not a member of any political party and does not hold any political ideology. Finding the plaintiffs are likely to succeed on the merits and issuing a preliminary injunction. And when you look at the specifics of what they were suppressing, Charlie, what the feds, the White House, was repeatedly contacting Facebook, YouTube, and so on about, it's absolutely offensive and well beyond what any normal administration would ever think it was within their purview to censor.
Well, that's exactly right. And we actually are looking at potential legal action against the Election Integrity Project because we were singled out as spreaders of disinformation. What was our thought crime, Megyn? Well, we decided to tweet out that Hunter Biden's laptop was probably legitimate. We lost access to our Twitter account for a week. We were placed on Twitter's blacklist. And that's another important piece of information here is that thanks to Elon Musk's purchase of Twitter, we have this amazing amount of evidence that then reinforces what the Attorney General of Missouri and Louisiana will be able to find in discovery. And you pair that together, and what you find is that the federal government has spent billions of dollars of man hours of personnel monitoring, policing, and censoring domestic political speech. And so before we go any further, it just makes you wonder, what would the country look like ideologically if they didn't interfere in these conversations? I mean, I believe we are a center-right country, and we're increasingly becoming more of a center-right country. Public opinion polls show that. There might be some disagreement on social issues, but we are moving in the center-right direction, especially as people see the nonsense of the left every day. I think we'd be even more of a conservative country if we had liberated dialogue and discourse. And so you look at, what is the federal government tasked with doing primarily? Well, first of all, protecting our country from threats abroad and, if necessary, domestically. They look at their charge as saying those right-wingers are a threat to democracy. Do you see how all of these MSNBC narratives then become policy? When you have John Brenner go on TV and say, oh yeah, you know, the people that did January 6th, half the country, they need to be surveilled, they need to be spied on. That gives the marching orders to CISA, to the Department of Homeland Security, to all these different instruments of government to then censor speech they don't like. But what makes this case fascinating and interesting is they didn't do it bluntly. There is the examples of the FBI meeting with Twitter and the FBI visiting Mark Zuckerberg and saying that, hey, there might be some Russian disinformation, but they got a little creative. They got a little cute. They said, well, what if we give all this money to an outside group and then they do the censoring for us? So it's censorship by proxy. You cannot do that. And they got caught. And you read it perfectly where the judge says this is the worst attack on free speech in American history. Oh, yeah. And it's probably still ongoing, Megyn. It makes you wonder, what were their plans for 2024 going to be for this upcoming presidential election? If this ruling stands, this very well might even the playing field to some degree so that we might be able to have something, I don't know, called a fair and free election so that we can have speech online where we can actually talk about a candidate's qualifications or their corruption or their favorability or not. And this all goes back to this idea that the fourth branch of government, the unelected, the civil service bureaucrats, the desk workers, you can call them the deep state or the uniparty, the Leviathan, all these terms work, is that they believe they call the shots. They do not want to have the people be able to express their opinions without them being the ultimate check and balance. And they fear, Megyn, that there is a center-right resurgence in this country. Take Donald Trump out of the equation for a second. They fear that the country is starting to reject this sort of trans zealotry, that they find this idea of chest feeding or teaching pornography to 9-year-olds in schools to be outright repulsive. And so they are using every means at their disposal to go after the political dissidents, which are people like me, like you. Dan Bongino was also put on a blacklist. And where did this all come from? This came from Republicans mostly, Megyn, who passed these agencies from bill into law post 9/11. There's a supply and demand problem with terrorism. We started with Islamic terrorism in 2005, 2006, 04, 05, 06 being the biggest threat, and it was a big threat. But guess what? Those agencies were never shuttered down as the threat waned. They instead reconfigured. They found a new target, patriotic conservative Americans that they don't like, and they are treating us like ISIS and Al-Qaeda, the same sort of behavior, language, and censorship that they would with a terrorist group in the Middle East.
Gosh, you're so right. And it's when you see, you get to pull the curtain back and see behind the scenes what they were actually doing, how angry they were at the social media companies when they didn't censor. In particular on COVID, they go through, it's, if you want to go look at the judge's opinion, it's on, I think, page 9. They go through the lists, the list of some of the things that they pushed on. The COVID response team from the White House contacting Twitter to remove an anti-vaccine tweet by Robert Kennedy Jr.,
there you go.
And asking for oversight by big tech on similar tweets. We're asking you to be our partner in this censorship. Then you've got one, this is just a few examples. You could go down the list. April 2021, Facebook reported it would have a new policy allowing for the removal of certain profiles due to off-platform behavior. All right, so if you're bad in your personal life, Facebook can remove you. And the White House requested more information on the specifics of this policy. Oh, we really like it. Facebook's like, yeah, go for it. From the filing, it appears this guy Flaherty told Facebook, I care mostly about what actions and charges you're making to ensure you're not making our country's vaccine hesitancy problems worse, accusing Facebook of being responsible for January 6th and indicating that Facebook would be similarly responsible for COVID-related deaths if it did not censor more. Just the threats that went on here. June 2021, a Meta, that's Facebook, executive confirming to the White House staff that they would continue to increase censorship of misleading information, according to the White House's, quote, requests. They committed to providing weekly reports to the White House. My God. And here's the final example I'll bring up here. This guy Flaherty, again, he was deputy assistant to the president at the time. He wanted to know why Facebook had not removed a Tucker Carlson video that was anti-vax or raising questions about the vax, questioning how that video had been demoted, which he'd been assured it had been, since it already had 40,000 shares. That was unacceptable to the White House to be allowing, not promoting, but just to be allowing Tucker's video to be shared. Facebook reported that Tucker's content had not violated any Facebook policy, but Facebook nonetheless agreed to give the video a 50% demotion for 7 days and stated that it would continue to demote the video. Unbelievable.
I got asked once by a student on campus, and they said, Charlie, why do you think you are right in historical terms? I said, look, I might not be right on every issue, but I know I'm on the right side of history because the people doing the censoring are never on the right side. And this is the best example, that if you have to use the full force of government to shut up people you don't like, and Megyn, if I could just connect the dots, I've been warning about this culture of shutting people up that you disagree with that originated on college campuses. Instead of having debate and dialogue, instead of saying, oh yeah, actually the vaccine is safe and it's effective and Robert Kennedy Jr., here are the facts and let's have a dialogue about it, they have to use force. And so there are really basically two ways you could set up a government. You could set up a government using speech and dialogue and reason and debate, or you could set up a government based on force. Our original constitutional model that we celebrated this week on Independence Day, when in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands that have tied them to another, it was making an argument based a government on speech, that you no longer can force us, King George. You can't force us to do things we don't like. You're going to have to use reason. And it says to use consent of the governed. This current regime, they're done with that. They don't want to talk to you. That's a waste of time. Why would I talk to Robert Kennedy Jr.? He's a kook. Why would I talk to Tucker Carlson? He's a Russian puppet and propagandist. This is the pattern of tyrants to use the instruments of government to go after people that might be a threat or might be pose some sort of disagreement to their aims and their ambitions.
In a startling description, the UN food chief warned the world with these words, knocking on famine's door. He called what we're facing a perfect storm of a perfect storm. And he's not alone. A Barron's report says a food shortage could be coming even in the U.S. Farmers see it too. John Boyd Jr., a fourth-generation farmer, recently said, we're going to see empty food shelves in the coming months. That's why getting survival food may be more important than ever. Create your own stockpile of the best-selling 4 Patriots survival food kits. It's not just any ordinary food. We're talking good for 25 years, super survival food. Hand-packed in a family-owned facility in the USA and giving jobs to over 200 Americans. They have different delicious breakfasts, lunches, and dinners. You can make these meals in less than 20 minutes. Add a little boiling water, simmer, serve. And right now, for the next few days, viewers are going to get 10% off their first order at 4patriots.com. That's the numeral 4, patriots.com, just by using the code MK. Go to 4patriots.com, use the code MK to start your stockpile today. Hey, thanks so much for watching. If you like what you just saw, hit the subscribe button for more clips and full episodes.